Hi there. Again, you have my wife playing piano in the background. She loves to play the piano. And continuing in this series of how I went about learning different languages, I'm going to talk about Swedish. I was born in Sweden. I lived there till I was 5, so I can only imagine that I only spoke Swedish. When we moved to Canada, I have no recollection of sort of transitioning from Swedish into English. Nowadays, they put people in ESL class. They have all kinds of help for young, children of immigrants to learn the language, whatever. Granted, there weren't so many immigrants, but I can't remember transitioning from Swedish. I started the next year at school. I had friends. We played football. Everything was normal. We spoke English. With the result, of course, that I forgot my Swedish. And at the age of 16, I visited Sweden because my mother had died. She passed away quite young from cancer. And my uncle, her brother, lived in Sweden. So my father decided to send me to Sweden to spend some time with my uncle. And my uncle had a son who was 10 years younger than me. So I was 16 and he was 6. At the airport, and he came out to meet me, and he was an only child, so he was very excited to see his only, and he had no other relatives in Sweden, to see his only cousin, older cousin. And I remember driving home from the airport because we couldn't communicate. He was crying out of frustration that we couldn't say anything to each other. But I spent 2 months in Stockholm. My uncle got me a job in the warehouse of a large department store where they would tell me to go and get something and bring it to the front so they could load trucks. So I did that for 8 hours a day. Earned a bit of money, and I heard a bit of Swedish. And slowly, of course, they all spoke English, but still, it was exposure. And then subsequent to that, I was as a student in France, in Grenoble. There were a lot of Swedish girls down there. So there's a real incentive. So I spent a fair amount of time with them. So that was very good for my Swedish. Not probably so good for my French, but it was good for my Swedish. So the Swedish thing started to kind of, and I'm sure that having heard it for 5 years as a child, it was, it helped me. But I had a very limited vocabulary. Then, after starting my own company in 1987, we ended up doing business in Sweden because we wanted to basically develop, Canadian lumber, spruce and pine. We wanted to grade it to the European specification. So I went to Sweden and we found a guy who was a retired mill manager who was willing to come out and teach us, the Canadian mills, how to grade this lumber to European specifications. So I started having this involvement with Sweden, and lo and behold, in 1993, there was a dramatic shift in world lumber markets, whereby we could no longer export from North America because the prices in North America were so high, but we could buy in Sweden and sell to Japan. So I started doing more and more business in Sweden. So then I decided to really work on improving my Swedish. Not that I needed to, because the people we dealt with all spoke English, with a few exceptions. But I wanted to really improve my Swedish. And basically, what I did was listen and read. And the biggest influence on my Swedish, by far, was this. Herman Lindqvist, Historien om Sverige. History of Sweden, okay? And I mean, he writes the most wonderful popularization of history. Now, it just so happens that I like history. And of course, it's very important that you read about things that you like. And not only did he have this book, but he also read his book. So I was able to listen to the book and read the book. And I have listened to Herman Lindqvist so much and so many times, and this one is kind of like a summary. No, this is one of the sections, Drömmar och verklighet, which is, I think, the modern period. But he also has one where he talks about the history of Sweden from the Ice Age till the future, or till the framtid, I guess, I don't know what that is. I don't know, my vocabulary in Sweden sometimes is lacking. The present day, I guess. Historien om Sverige från istid till framtid. So there you got all this good stuff to listen to. I also got very interested. I'd go to Sweden and I'd just go and buy all the audiobooks I could find. There was an excellent series on how to make speeches in Swedish. And I don't know how many times I listened to this. And of course, Herman Lindqvist, there's another one on Charles XII. There's one on Gustav Vasa. They even did a thing on Napoleon. And I mean, these are just some. I mean, well done audiobooks are so wonderful. And I can still remember when I'm in Sweden and I fly out there in the winter and it's, you know, I can't sleep because of the jet lag. I'm up at 4 o'clock. I go jogging in the snow, listening to, you know, Herman Lindqvist over and over again and reading. And of course, when I'm there, I read the newspaper. And yeah, that was it. Now, I have great gaps in my vocabulary in Swedish. I would like to, at some point, really work on my Swedish here at Link, you know, saving the words and working the words. But, I mean, I can work my way through a history book. History books are, for me, easy to read because I'm so interested that even like in Czech, as I've mentioned, I read my Czech history book, I can understand what they're talking about, and so eventually, you know, you start to get used to the vocabulary. It's not ideal. More ideal is I guess, what we've done at Link. But yeah, that's basically Swedish. Undoubtedly helped by the fact that I grew up, or I spent the first 5 years of my life speaking Swedish, but then I completely forgot it. And now I have an adult vocabulary in Swedish, even though there are gaps in it that I would like to work at. So there's not much more to say on Swedish. I ended up having quite an involvement with Sweden in the timber trade because we still export lumber from Sweden to Japan, and I would go there 2-3 times a year, and even though a lot of the people there speak English, the business people and so forth, very often they're happy to speak in their own language. If you speak someone's language well, people are happy to speak their own language. I often hear this complaint that people won't speak to me in English and stuff, and there are people like that, but most people are most comfortable speaking their own language. And that's certainly what I have found in Sweden, and I love going there. I like having the aquavit. In fact, we had aquavit tonight because we often, before dinner, my wife always makes a little hors d'oeuvre, and tonight we will take some salmon and slice it up for sashimi, and I like to pour olive oil on my sashimi, and with a little wasabi, of course, and soy sauce. And because it's raw, just like in Sweden when you have the gravad lax, which is their cured, you know, salmon, you have it with aquavit. So we had a little glass of aquavit before we had our meal. And the main meal was chicken and with lots of greens and stuff, to which we had a little bit of wine. So we had a very nice meal. But I always have that, you know, attachment to many things in Sweden, including, of course, the aquavit, the gravad lax, and the history, the language, and all these things. Like with every language that you learn, it brings so much with it, so many things that you can enjoy. So there you have it. That's Sweden.